The spaceship Harmony's Edge moved slowly through the blue waters of planet Kepler 442b. Captain Jiwan stood by the big window, watching two moons rise over the endless ocean. His ship had been studying this water world for 3 months now. The planet was almost all water, with strange glowing coral reefs that lit up like Christmas lights under the waves. Jiwan was a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but this planet was special. The water was so clear you could see down for hundreds of meters. Strange fish swam in schools that moved like flowing silk, but today felt different somehow. "Captain, we found something in Area 7, called Minho from the control room. He was young and always excited about new discoveries. His voice had that edge that meant something important was happening. Jiwan walked quickly to the control room. On the big screen, he could see a map of the water around their ship. A red dot was blinking near some huge floating plants. These plants looked like giant lily pads, each one as big as a sports field. They glowed with soft light and moved gently with the waves. "What are we looking at?" Jiwan asked. "Something is moving in the water," Minho said, pointing at the screen. "It looks like it might be in trouble." Jiwan leaned forward to get a better look. The ship's cameras zoomed in on the area. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There was a creature floating between the giant plants. It looked like a cat, but not like any cat from Earth. This creature had purple and silver fur that seemed to change colors as it moved. It was about the size of a house cat, but it had 6 legs instead of 4. Along its sides were thin, clear fins that looked like butterfly wings. But the most amazing thing was its eyes. They were huge and looked like opals, full of colors that seemed to swirl and dance. The creature was in trouble. It was trying to swim, but every time it got close to one of the giant plants, something pushed it away. Little sparks of electricity jumped across the water around the plants. Each time the sparks touched the creature, it would shake and sink lower in the water. "The plants are making some kind of electric field," said Taehyun from his science station. He was the smartest person on the ship when it came to understanding new things. "The creature cannot get close to anything solid. The electricity is keeping it away from safety." Hana, who worked with communications, put her hand over her mouth. "It is drowning," she whispered. "Look how tired it is getting." Jiwan watched the creature struggle. Its beautiful fur was getting darker as it got wet. Its 6 legs were moving slower and slower. The worst part was its eyes. They looked so intelligent, so aware of what was happening. This was not just an animal. This creature understood that it was going to die. "I am going down there," Jiwan said, turning toward the equipment room. "Captain, wait," Minho called after him. "The rules say we have to study unknown creatures first. We need to run tests and make reports before we make contact." Jiwan stopped and looked back at his crew. They were all good people, and they were right about the rules. But sometimes rules were not as important as doing what was right. "That creature is dying right now," he said firmly. "We can study it after we save it. If we wait for all the paperwork, it will be too late." He started putting on his diving suit. It was light and flexible, designed for this planet's atmosphere. The water here was safe for humans, but he still needed protection from the electric fields around the plants. "Sometimes the best thing about being human is not following every rule," Jiwan said as he checked his equipment. "Sometimes we have to trust our hearts instead of our books. If Earth sent us out here to represent humanity, then we should show what makes humans special, and what makes us special is that we help others, even when it is dangerous." Hana started the small rescue boat while Jiwan finished getting ready. The boat was just big enough for 2 people and had special shields to protect against electric fields. It could move fast and quiet through the water. "Be careful, Captain," Dr. Soyeon called from the medical bay. She was worried about the electric fields and what they might do to human equipment. "We do not know how strong those fields are." Jiwan climbed into the rescue boat and looked back at his crew one more time. They were watching him with expressions of worry and pride. They knew he was taking a big risk, but they also knew it was the right thing to do. "Keep the ship ready," he told them through his radio. "I have a feeling this is going to be more complicated than just a simple rescue." The rescue boat dropped into the water with a small splash. Jiwan started the quiet engine and headed toward the struggling creature. The water around him was incredibly clear and beautiful. Schools of alien fish swam past, their scales glittering like jewels. But he kept his eyes focused on the small purple and silver shape ahead. As he got closer, he could see that the creature was barely moving now. It was floating on its side, its 6 legs hanging limply in the water. Only the slow rise and fall of its chest showed that it was still alive. Its beautiful eyes were half closed, as if it had given up hope. The electric fields around the plants were stronger than they had looked from the ship. Every few seconds, bright blue sparks would dance across the water. When they hit the creature, it would twitch and sink a little deeper. Ji-won had to time his approach very carefully. He watched the pattern of the electric pulses. They came in waves with short breaks between them. During those breaks, the water was safe, but the breaks only lasted a few seconds and he would need to be very fast. "Almost there, little one," he whispered, even though he knew the creature probably could not hear him. "Just hold on a little longer." The rescue boat shot forward during the next break in the electric field. Ji-won reached out and carefully lifted the creature from the water. The moment his hands touched its fur, something amazing happened. A warm feeling flowed through his fingers and up his arms. It was not quite physical and not quite mental, but something in between. Suddenly, pictures flashed through his mind. He saw underwater cities with tall spiral buildings. He saw creatures like this one, but bigger and more majestic, swimming through gardens of singing coral. He saw vast oceans under alien skies, full of life and beauty beyond imagination. The creature's eyes opened wide and looked directly into his. In that moment, Ji-won knew with complete certainty that this was not just an animal. This was an intelligent being, and it was trying to tell him something very important. Ji-won held the alien creature carefully in his arms as the rescue boat moved back toward the ship. The little being was warm and surprisingly light. Its fur felt softer than anything he had ever touched, like silk mixed with clouds. As they traveled through the clear water, the creature's breathing became stronger and more steady. The most amazing thing was its eyes. They stayed focused on Ji-won's face the whole time, as if it was studying him just as much as he was studying it. Sometimes the eyes would flash with different colors, and when that happened, Ji-won would feel more images in his mind. He saw deep ocean trenches, massive shadows moving in the darkness, and a feeling of great danger approaching. "Captain, how is our guest doing?" Hana's voice came through the radio. "Better," Ji-won replied, gently stroking the creature's head. "But I think it is trying to tell me something important, something about danger in the deep water." When they reached the ship, the whole crew was waiting. Dr. Soyeon had prepared a special room in the medical bay with everything she thought an alien creature might need. There was a shallow pool of clean water, soft bedding, and equipment to monitor the creature's health. As soon as Ji-won carried the creature onto the ship, it became very alert. Its head turned back and forth, looking at everything with intense curiosity. When they reached the medical bay, the creature made a soft sound that was like a mix between a cat's purr and distant thunder. "The neural activity is incredible," Dr. Soyeon said, looking at her scanner readings. "This creature's brain is more complex than anything we have ever seen. It might be smarter than humans." The creature seemed to understand that it was safe now. It moved around the prepared habitat, sniffing everything with its small nose. But after a few minutes, it positioned itself near the communication equipment and sat very still, as if it was listening for something. Ji-won knelt down beside the habitat. The moment he put his hand near the clear wall, the creature came over and pressed its paw against the same spot. Again, the warm feeling flowed between them, but this time the images were clearer and more organized. He saw the ocean of this planet from a completely different perspective. The water was not just water, but a living network full of information and energy. The giant plants they had seen on the surface were connected to each other through invisible signals that traveled through the water like a giant nervous system. "The plants are not just plants," Ji-won said slowly, trying to understand what he was seeing. "They are part of something bigger. They are like the brain cells of the entire ocean." The creature's eyes flashed brighter, and suddenly Ji-won could see even deeper into the water. Far below, in trenches that their instruments had never reached, enormous shapes were moving. These creatures were so big that at first Ji-won thought they were underwater mountains. But then he realized they were alive and they were moving upward toward the surface. "Captain," Minho called from the bridge, his voice tight with worry. "The floating plants are acting strange. They are flashing faster and brighter than before." On the main screen, they could see that all the giant plants across the ocean were now pulsing with urgent light. The slow, peaceful rhythms they had observed for months were now rapid and frantic. It looked like a warning system spreading across the entire planet. The creature in the habitat became very excited. It started moving in complex patterns, almost like it was dancing. But Ji-won could sense there was meaning in every movement. Dr. Soyan quickly activated the recording system to capture everything. "It is making a map," she said with amazement. "Look at the pattern. It is showing us the positions of the plants, the ocean currents, and something else." The creature paused at certain points in its movement, and its eyes would flash with special intensity. Through their mental connection, Jiwan realized it was marking strategic positions, places where their ship should be located for some kind of coordinated action. "It wants us to help," Jiwan breathed. "It is giving us battle plans." "Captain," Taehyun's voice came from his science station filled with alarm. "Deep scan is picking up massive movement from the ocean floor. Multiple contacts, each one enormous. They are at 8 kilometers depth and rising." The creature suddenly stood up on its back legs and pressed all 4 front paws against the habitat wall. The urgency and the mental images it was sending became overwhelming. Jiwan could feel its desperation, its fear not for itself but for its entire world. Through the creature's memories he learned its name. It was something like the sound of wind through crystal caves, but he simplified it in his mind to Nabi, which meant butterfly in Korean. It seemed fitting for something so beautiful and graceful. Nabi showed him more images of the giant creatures rising from the depths. They were not evil monsters, but ancient guardians of the planet. They had been sleeping in the deep trenches for thousands of years, but something had awakened them. They were rising because they thought the planet was in danger. The plants have been sending distress signals, Jiwan realized. Ever since our ship arrived, they have been calling for help. The guardians think we are invaders. Nabi's mental projections became even more intense. The creature showed him what would happen when the guardians reached the surface. They would try to protect the planet by creating massive energy waves that would destroy any technology within thousands of kilometers. It was a defense system designed to stop alien invasions, but it would kill Jiwan and his crew. "How long before they reach the surface?" Jiwan asked. "At their current speed, about 6 hours, Taehyun replied. Nabi began making different sounds now, ranging from very low rumbles to high, clear notes like bells. The ship's computer immediately started analyzing the patterns, looking for mathematical relationships and repeated themes. "It is trying to teach us its language," Dr. Soyan said with excitement. "But we do not have 6 hours to learn a completely new way of communicating." That was when Jiwan made a decision that would change everything. He looked at Nabi, whose golden green eyes held such intelligence and trust. The little creature had tried to warn its own people and failed. Now it was placing all its hope in these strange beings from another world. "There might be another way," Jiwan said quietly. "Nabi has been sharing images with me through touch. Maybe we can create a stronger connection, share thoughts more directly." "Captain, that could be extremely dangerous," Dr. Soyan warned. "We have no idea what linking minds with an alien species might do to human consciousness." Jiwan looked around at his crew. They were all watching him with expressions of trust and concern. They knew he was considering something risky, but they also knew that time was running out. "This is why we came to the stars," he said finally. "Not just to explore, but to prove that humanity can work with other species. If we cannot find a way to communicate with Nabi in the next few hours, we all die. But if we succeed, we might save not just ourselves, but this entire world." Nabi pressed itself against the habitat wall, its eyes locked on Jiwan's face. In its expression, he could see determination, hope, and the willingness to risk everything for the chance to save its planet. The choice was clear. They would attempt the first human-alien mind link in history, with the fate of 2 species hanging in the balance. Dr. Soyan worked quickly to prepare the special chamber for the mind link attempt. She had never done anything like this before, but she knew it was their only hope. The medical bay was filled with monitoring equipment, all focused on understanding what would happen when a human mind connected directly with an alien consciousness. "Captain, I must warn you again," Dr. Soyan said as she checked the instruments one more time. "We have no idea what this could do to your brain. The electrical patterns in Nabi's mind are completely different from human patterns. This could cause permanent damage." Jiwan sat in the chair next to Nabi's habitat. The little creature was watching him with those incredible eyes, and he could feel waves of encouragement and gratitude flowing from it. Despite the danger, Nabi was willing to share this risk with him. "Have you found any signs that it might be dangerous?" Jiwan asked. Dr. Soyan looked at her readings carefully. "Actually, the opposite. When you and Nabi are close together, both your brain waves become more stable. It is almost like your minds are designed to work together. That was encouraging news, but it also raised new questions. How could two species from different worlds have compatible minds? It seemed impossible, unless there was something they did not understand about the way intelligent life developed in the galaxy. 5 hours until the Guardians reached the surface, Taehyun announced from the bridge. The first one is now at 3 kilometers depth. Captain, our long-range sensors are getting better readings. This thing is massive, over 300 meters long. Through the habitat wall, Ji-won could see Nabi's reaction to that news. The creature's eyes flashed with what seemed like excitement rather than fear. Through their weak mental connection, Ji-won sensed that a 300-meter Guardian was actually one of the smaller ones. The young ones were more flexible in their thinking and more willing to listen to new ideas. That might be good news, Ji-won said. Nabi thinks the smaller Guardian might be easier to reason with. Dr. Soyeon finished her preparations and stepped back. The monitoring systems are ready. If your vital signs become dangerous, I will break the connection immediately. Ji-won placed his hand against the habitat wall, and Nabi pressed its paw against the same spot. The warm feeling of connection flowed between them, but this time Ji-won did not resist it. Instead, he opened his mind and let the alien consciousness flow in. The effect was incredible. Suddenly, Ji-won could perceive the ocean world through Nabi's senses. He could feel the deep currents that carried nutrients across the planet. He could sense the electromagnetic songs that the floating plants used to communicate across vast distances. Most importantly, he could understand the delicate balance that kept this water world's ecosystem alive and healthy. Neural activity is increasing rapidly, Dr. Soyeon reported. But her voice seemed to come from very far away. Captain, your brain is processing information at rates that should be impossible for humans. But Ji-won was no longer thinking like a single human. Through Nabi's enhanced consciousness, he was touching something much larger. The floating plants were not separate organisms, but parts of a single vast intelligence that spanned the entire planet. It was like trying to have a conversation with a living continent. This planetary mind had been managing the ocean world's ecosystem for millions of years. It controlled everything from weather patterns to the chemical balance of the water. It was ancient beyond human understanding, wise and patient, but currently operating in emergency mode. The arrival of the human ship had triggered defensive protocols that had not been activated for thousands of years. The planetary intelligence had interpreted their presence as a potential invasion, and had been broadcasting distress calls ever since they arrived. We caused this, Ji-won realized. His consciousness stretched across multiple levels of awareness. Our ship made the planetary mind think we were enemies. It has been calling for help for 3 months. Through Nabi's knowledge, Ji-won began to understand the complex relationship between the floating plants, the planetary consciousness, and the ancient guardians sleeping in the deep trenches. The guardians were not just protectors but maintenance workers, rising periodically to adjust and repair the planetary systems when problems arose. But the timing was all wrong now. The guardians were rising in response to an emergency that was not real, and if they reached the surface and found the systems operating outside normal parameters, they would reset everything. The electromagnetic pulse from a planetary reset would destroy all technology within 1,000 kilometers. There has to be a way to explain this to them, Ji-won thought, his mind now seamlessly blending human logic with Nabi's intimate understanding of the planetary systems. Nabi's response came not in words but in complex emotional concepts. The Guardians could be reasoned with, but only if the approach was made correctly. There were protocols for this. Diplomatic procedures that had been established over millions of years of evolution. The problem was that these protocols required someone who could interface directly with both the planetary consciousness and the rising guardians. Nabi's people had evolved for this purpose, but the little scout was too small and too exhausted to handle such a massive communication task alone. However, through their mind link, Ji-won was beginning to understand a possible solution. By combining human strategic thinking with Nabi's biological compatibility, they might be able to reach both the planetary mind and the Guardian simultaneously. Captain, the lead Guardian is now at 2 kilometers depth. Minho's voice came through the ship's communication system. We are starting to get visual confirmation. Sir, it is beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Through Nabi's consciousness, Ji-won could sense the approaching Guardian. It was indeed beautiful, with scales that reflected light and patterns that seemed to sing with mathematical precision. Its mind was vast and ancient, filled with the wisdom of geological ages, but also deeply concerned about the distress signals coming from the planetary systems. "We need to establish communication before it reaches the surface," Jiwan said, his voice strained from the effort of maintaining the mind link. "Nabi knows the proper protocols, but we need to approach this very carefully." Dr. Soyeon checked her instruments with growing amazement. "Captain, your brain activity is stabilizing at the higher levels. Whatever is happening, your mind is adapting to it." The mind link was becoming stronger and more stable. Jiwan could now perceive the ocean world on multiple levels simultaneously. He was aware of individual fish swimming past the ship, vast weather patterns forming over distant continents, and the slow, deep thoughts of the planetary consciousness as it tried to decide how to respond to the approaching Guardians. Most importantly, he could sense the Guardian's mind as it rose through the water. It was not a monster or a machine, but a thinking being with emotions and concerns. It was worried about its world and determined to protect it, but it was also curious about these strange new visitors. "The Guardian is trying to understand what we are," Jiwan realized. "It has never encountered anything like humans before. Our technology is different from what it expects, and our intentions are unclear." Through Nabi's knowledge of diplomatic protocols, Jiwan began to formulate a plan. They would need to approach the Guardian using specific movement patterns that identified them as peaceful visitors rather than potential threats. The ship would have to follow precise courses that had been established over millions of years of interspecies contact. "Take us to coordinates that Nabi is showing me," Jiwan instructed, his consciousness now comfortably spanning both human and alien perspectives. "We need to position ourselves in the diplomatic approach pattern." The harmony's edge began to move in a complex spiral that felt strange to human sensibilities but carried deep meaning. In the ocean world's communication protocols, Jiwan could feel Nabi guiding their movements through the mind link, adjusting course and speed to match frequencies that had been established long before humans had ever looked at the stars. As they approached the optimal position, the floating plants around them began to change their light patterns. The frantic emergency pulses were gradually being replaced by more complex signals that incorporated concepts of curiosity and cautious welcome alongside the original distress calls. "The planetary mind is learning about us," Jiwan explained to his crew. "Through our connection with Nabi, it is beginning to understand that we are not invaders but explorers. It is updating its assessment of the situation, but the real test was still coming." The Guardian was now less than a kilometer from the surface, and its massive presence was creating subtle changes in the water currents around them. Soon they would be face to face with one of the most ancient and powerful beings in the galaxy. The success or failure of first contact would depend on whether Jiwan and Nabi could maintain their mind link while simultaneously communicating with a creature whose thoughts moved at the speed of continents. The water around the ship began to glow with a strange blue light as the massive Guardian approached the surface. Jiwan could feel its presence through the mind link with Nabi, like standing near a mountain that was slowly coming to life. The creature's thoughts were deep and powerful, moving with the weight of millions of years of experience. "Captain, you need to see this," Hana called from the bridge, her voice filled with wonder and fear. On the main screen, they could see the water beginning to bulge upward about 500 meters away. Whatever was rising from the depths was so large that it was pushing the entire ocean surface higher. Small waves rippled outward from the disturbance, rocking their ship gently. Through his connection with Nabi, Jiwan could sense the Guardian's confusion. The ancient being was trying to understand why the planetary systems were crying out in distress when there seemed to be no obvious threat. The floating plants were sending mixed signals now, some still broadcasting emergency warnings while others were trying to communicate something new and different. "It does not understand what we are," Jiwan said, his voice strained from maintaining the mental link. "Nabi's people are the only intelligent species it has ever encountered on this world. Humans are completely outside its experience." Dr. Soyeon monitored Jiwan's vital signs carefully. "Your neural activity is stable, but the patterns are unlike anything in medical literature. You are processing information at levels that should not be possible for a single human brain." The truth was that Jiwan no longer felt like a single human. Through Nabi's consciousness, he was connected to the vast intelligence of the planetary systems. He could sense weather patterns forming over distant continents, feel the movement of deep ocean currents, and perceive the delicate chemical balances that kept the entire ecosystem functioning. Most importantly, He could feel the Guardian's mind as it approached. It was not just one creature, but the focal point of an ancient network of intelligence that spanned the ocean depths. The Guardian was connected to dozens of others sleeping in trenches around the planet, and through them to systems of knowledge that had been accumulating for geological ages. First visual contact in 30 seconds, Mino announced from his position at the sensors. The water continued to rise until suddenly it broke apart in a cascade of brilliant droplets. What emerged from the depths took everyone's breath away. The Guardian was even more magnificent than Nabi's mental images had suggested. Its head alone was larger than their entire ship, elegant and streamlined like a work of art. Its scales were not just reflective but seemed to contain their own inner light, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like living music. Most incredible of all were its eyes. They were the size of windows, filled with colors that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of light. And when they focused on the human ship, Jiwan felt the weight of an intelligence that had existed since before humans had discovered fire. The Guardian's voice, when it spoke, did not come through the air but directly through the water and into the ship's hull. The sound was like the singing of whales mixed with the deep rumble of earthquakes. But through Nabi's translation, Jiwan could understand the meaning. Small swimmers of the metal shell, the Guardian said, its mental voice carrying overtones of curiosity and ancient authority. You are unknown to the deep records. From where do you swim? And why do the surface systems cry out in fear when you approach? This was the moment that would determine everything. Jiwan took a deep breath and allowed Nabi to guide his response. Through their mind link, he projected the story of humanity's journey from Earth, their peaceful mission of exploration, and the accidental triggering of the planetary defense systems. The Guardian's massive head tilted slightly as it processed this information. Through its connection to the planetary consciousness, it began to review the events of the past 3 months, seeing them now from a completely different perspective. Your metal shell carries unknown energies, the Guardian observed. The surface systems interpreted these energies as a threat and called for protection. But you swim in patterns of curiosity, not aggression. This creates contradiction in the ancient protocols. More Guardians were rising now, their massive forms creating gentle whirlpools as they reached the surface. Each one added its voice to the growing conversation, sharing perspectives that spanned millions of years of experience. Through Nabi, Jiwan was participating in the most ancient form of democracy in the galaxy, a council of beings whose decisions affected entire worlds. The small swimmer carries the thoughts of a surface dweller, another Guardian noted, referring to Nabi. This creates a bridge between the deep knowledge and the bright waters. Perhaps understanding can flow through this bridge. Jiwan felt Nabi's excitement as the Guardians began to grasp the significance of their mental connection. For the first time in the planet's history, a deep Guardian was able to communicate directly with a being from another world, using one of the surface dwellers as a translator. Show us your true nature. Swimmers from beyond the sky, the first Guardian requested. Let us see your thoughts and intentions, so that we may judge whether you bring harmony or discord to our world. This was the test Jiwan had been expecting. The Guardians wanted to examine human consciousness directly, to understand what kind of species they were dealing with. It was potentially dangerous, opening his mind completely to beings of such vast intelligence, but it was also the only way to prove humanity's peaceful intentions. I will show you who we are, Jiwan said, his voice carrying both determination and humility. Through the mind link with Nabi, Jiwan began to share humanity's story. He showed the Guardians Earth's blue skies and green forests, the long struggle of human civilization to learn cooperation and wisdom. He shared memories of humans helping each other during disasters, of scientists working together to solve problems, of explorers like himself who ventured into space not to conquer but to understand. Most importantly, he showed them the moment when he had rescued Nabi from the water, risking his own safety to save a creature he had never seen before. This single act of compassion seemed to resonate strongly with the Guardians, who understood that true character was revealed in moments of choice. This is unusual behavior for a sky swimmer species, the lead Guardian commented, its mental voice carrying notes of surprise. Most who achieve the power to travel between worlds focus only on taking resources for themselves. Your concern for a single surface dweller, even at personal risk, speaks of wisdom beyond your apparent age as a species. The examination continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The Guardians explored human concepts of justice, cooperation, and environmental stewardship. They were particularly interested in humanity's growing understanding of ecological balance and their efforts to repair damage caused by earlier industrial development. We see potential in this species, the Council of Guardians finally decided. They are young and sometimes foolish, but they carry the seeds of wisdom. They may be taught to swim in harmony with the deep currents of life. But the decision was not unanimous. Some of the Guardians remained concerned about the risks of allowing an unknown species to operate near their world. The debate that followed would determine not just the fate of Jiwan's crew, but humanity's future relationship with the most ancient civilization in this part of the galaxy. Through it all, Nabi served as the bridge between worlds, translating not just words but entire concepts of thought and feeling. The little creature that Jiwan had pulled from the water was becoming the key to the most important diplomatic negotiation in human history. The Council of Guardians floated around the human ship like living mountains, their massive forms creating a circle in the water. More had risen from the depths, until 7 of the ancient beings surrounded the Harmony's edge. Each Guardian was unique with different patterns of scales and slightly different shapes, but all carried the same aura of vast intelligence and authority. Through his mind link with Nabi, Jiwan could sense the debate taking place between the Guardians. Their thoughts moved slowly, like the shifting of continents, but the weight of their decisions would affect entire worlds. Some were curious about humanity and wanted to learn more. Others were cautious, worried about the risks of trusting a species they had never encountered before. "The young species shows promise," said the Guardian with silver scales that seemed to hold starlight within them. "Their rescue of the surface dweller demonstrates wisdom beyond their apparent age. Perhaps they can be guided to swim in harmony with the great currents." But another Guardian, whose scales were deep blue like the ocean depths, expressed concern. "Many species have shown early promise only to become destructive as they gain power. How can we know that these sky swimmers will not change when they grow stronger?" Jiwan felt the weight of representing his entire species in this moment. Every human who would ever travel to the stars would be judged by what happened here today. He thought about all the people back on Earth, about future generations who might benefit from friendship with these ancient beings, or suffer if this first contact failed. "We propose a test," the lead Guardian announced, its voice resonating through the water and into the ship's hull. "The young species will demonstrate their wisdom by helping us restore balance to the surface systems. If they succeed without causing harm, we will consider them worthy of partnership in the great community of worlds." Through Nabi's translation, Jiwan began to understand what the test would involve. The floating plants that covered the ocean were more than just monitoring stations. They were part of a vast network that regulated everything from weather patterns to the chemical composition of the atmosphere. The emergency signals triggered by the human ship's arrival had disrupted this delicate system. To restore balance, someone would need to manually recalibrate the network from within the electromagnetic fields that protected each plant formation. It was work that Nabi's people normally performed, but the little creature was too small and too exhausted to handle such a massive task alone. However, the Guardians had detected something interesting in the mind link between Jiwan and Nabi. Their consciousness could be joined more completely, allowing them to share not just thoughts, but actual neural processing power. Together, they might be able to accomplish what neither could do alone. "The joining will be dangerous for both beings," the lead Guardian warned. "The surface dweller's mind could be overwhelmed by the complexity of the task. The sky swimmer's consciousness could be lost in patterns too alien for his species to comprehend. Both risk permanent damage or death." Dr. Soyon's voice came through the communication system, tight with medical concern. "Captain, I must advise against this. We have no idea what a complete neural joining might do to human brain chemistry. The risks are enormous." But Jiwan was looking at Nabi, whose opalescent eyes held such trust and determination. The little creature had already risked everything to try to save its world. How could humanity offer anything less in return? "We accept the test," Jiwan said firmly, "but I want my crew to know that this is my choice alone. If something goes wrong, the responsibility is mine." Minho stepped forward from his position at the navigation console. Captain, with respect, you do not make this choice alone. We all came to the stars together, and we all share the risks together. If this is what it takes to prove that humans can be trusted partners in the galaxy, then we support you completely. Similar statements came from Hana, Taehyun, and Dr. Soyeon. Despite their fears and concerns, the crew stood united behind their captain. This was humanity at its best, Jiwon thought. When faced with danger, they did not abandon each other but stood together. The preparation for the complete neural joining took an hour of careful work. Dr. Soyeon monitored both Jiwon and Nabi constantly, looking for any signs that their nervous systems could not handle the increased connection. The Guardians provided guidance through subsonic communications that vibrated through the ship's hull, sharing knowledge of similar joinings they had witnessed over the millennia. The key is to maintain your individual identity while allowing the surface dwellers' knowledge to flow through your consciousness, the lead Guardian advised. You must become a bridge between your species and the planetary systems, translating concepts that have no equivalent in either language. As the joining deepened, Jiwon felt his awareness expanding beyond anything he had ever imagined. Through Nabi's enhanced consciousness, he began to perceive the ocean world as its native inhabitants did. Every drop of water carried information. Every current was part of a vast communication network. The planet itself was alive, thinking, feeling, responding to changes with the wisdom of geological ages. But the most remarkable discovery was that this was not the first time such a joining had occurred. In Nabi's genetic memory, Jiwon found traces of similar partnerships with other species, other sky swimmers who had proven themselves worthy of trust. The galaxy was full of intelligent life, and there were established protocols for welcoming new species into the community of worlds. The surface systems are responding to our joined consciousness, Jiwon reported, his voice strange as it carried harmonics from Nabi's vocal patterns. They recognize us as legitimate operators. We can begin the recalibration process, working. Together, human strategic thinking combined with alien biological knowledge, they began to restore balance to the planetary network. It was like conducting a symphony written for instruments that spanned continents, requiring precision and patience beyond normal human capabilities. The floating plants began to change their light patterns, shifting from chaotic emergency signals to the slower, more complex rhythms of normal operation. Through the joined consciousness, Jiwon could feel the planet's relief as its systems returned to healthy function. Most impressive, the lead Guardian observed. The young species learns quickly and works with wisdom. Perhaps they are indeed ready to swim in the deep currents with the rest of us. But the test was not finished yet. The most difficult part still lay ahead, and it would require Jiwon and Nabi to push their neural joining to its absolute limits. They would need to interface directly with the planetary consciousness itself, becoming temporary components of a mind that spanned an entire world. The success or failure of this final challenge would determine not just humanity's acceptance into the galactic community, but the future of relationships between all spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy. The moment came when Jiwon had to make the final connection with the planetary consciousness. Through his deep link with Nabi, he could sense the vast intelligence that lived within the ocean world itself. It was like standing at the edge of an infinite library, knowing that stepping inside would either grant him incredible knowledge or overwhelm his human mind completely. Neural activity is reaching levels we have never seen before, Dr. Soyeon reported, her voice tight with concern. Captain, your brain is processing information at rates that should be impossible. We are in uncharted territory. But Jiwon could no longer respond to individual voices. His consciousness had expanded far beyond the boundaries of his physical body. Through Nabi's biological interface, he was touching the edge of something so vast and complex that it made him feel like an ant trying to understand the ocean. The planetary mind was ancient beyond human comprehension. It had been thinking slowly and carefully for millions of years, managing every aspect of the world's ecosystem with patience that spanned geological ages. Its thoughts moved like the shifting of continents, each decision carefully considered across thousands of years. Yet now it was in crisis mode, trying to process the sudden appearance of beings it had never encountered before. The human ship represented something completely outside its experience. and the emergency protocols it had activated were designed for threats that no longer existed in the galaxy. The old defenses are not needed, G1 tried to communicate through the neural link. The galaxy has changed. There are new kinds of visitors now, peaceful ones who want to learn and share knowledge. The planetary consciousness turned its attention to this small spark of alien thought that had somehow entered its vast network. For a moment, Jiwan felt the full weight of that attention like being examined by a thinking mountain, but Nabi's presence provided protection and translation, helping the planetary mind understand that this newcomer was not a threat. "You are very small," the planetary consciousness observed, its mental voice like the sound of wind across continents. "Yet you carry patterns of thought that are complex and organized. Your species is young but shows potential for wisdom. How did you come to swim in the void between stars?" Through the link, Jiwan began to share humanity's story. He showed the planetary mind Earth's blue skies and vast forests, the long struggle of human civilization to learn cooperation and environmental responsibility. He shared the moment when humans first looked up at the stars and dreamed of traveling to distant worlds. Most importantly, he demonstrated the values that had driven humanity to reach for the stars. Not conquest or exploitation, but curiosity and the desire to understand their place in the universe. He showed the planetary mind how humans had learned to work together, how they had begun to heal the damage they had caused to their own world. "Your species has made mistakes," the planetary consciousness noted. "You have harmed your birth world through ignorance and short-term thinking. Yet you have also learned from these mistakes and begun to change your ways. This shows the possibility of growth." The examination continued as the planetary mind explored human concepts of cooperation, scientific discovery, and environmental stewardship. It was particularly interested in humanity's growing understanding that all life was interconnected, that damage to one part of an ecosystem affected everything else. "We see potential," the planetary consciousness finally decided. "Your species is young and sometimes foolish, but you carry the seeds of wisdom. Perhaps you can learn to swim in harmony with the great currents of life." But accepting humanity would require changes to the planetary defense systems. The network would need to learn to distinguish between aggressive invaders and peaceful explorers. This had never been done before, and the process would require careful programming to avoid mistakes that could endanger the entire world. "We will need to create new protocols," the planetary mind explained. "The old ways assumed that all sky swimmers were threats to be destroyed or driven away. But if the galaxy now contains peaceful species, we must learn to recognize and welcome them." This was the moment Jiwan had been preparing for without knowing it. Working through his connection with Nabi, he began to help the planetary consciousness understand concepts that had never existed in its vast memory banks. Ideas like diplomatic immunity, cultural exchange, and mutual benefit between species. The process was exhausting. Jiwan felt his human consciousness being stretched to its absolute limits as he tried to think in patterns that spanned millions of years. His mind had to process information about ocean currents that affected weather on distant continents, chemical balances that maintained atmospheric composition, and electromagnetic frequencies that coordinated the activities of countless organisms. But Nabi's support never wavered. The little creature shared its own strength and provided the biological interface that made communication possible. Together they formed a bridge between human understanding and planetary wisdom, translating concepts that had no equivalent in either form of consciousness. "The recalibration is working," Taehyun reported from his science station. "The floating plants are changing their energy signatures. They are becoming more complex, like they are learning new ways to think." Indeed, the planetary network was evolving in real time. The simple defensive protocols that had protected the world for millions of years were being replaced by sophisticated systems that could analyze a visitor's intentions as well as their capabilities. The network was learning to ask questions before making judgments. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Soyon said, watching her instruments with amazement. "The entire planetary consciousness is adapting, growing new neural pathways. It is like watching evolution happen in fast motion." Through the Guardian's ancient perspective, Jiwan could sense approval. The massive beings had witnessed many attempts at first contact over the millennia, but few had resulted in such profound growth for both species involved. The planetary mind was becoming something new, something greater than it had been before. But the most remarkable change was happening in the space between species. The protocols they were establishing would serve as a template for other worlds, a model for how advanced civilizations could interact peacefully with newcomers to the galaxy. The work is nearly complete, the planetary consciousness announced. The new patterns are stable and ready for implementation. Your species has proven worthy of trust and partnership. As the final connections were made, Jiwan felt a profound sense of accomplishment flowing through his link with Nabi. They had not just prevented a crisis, but had helped create something entirely new. The galaxy would be a little safer, a little more welcoming. Because of what they had accomplished together, the Guardians began to sing, their voices creating harmonics that resonated through the water and up into the ship. It was a song of celebration, of welcome, of hope for the future. Humanity had passed the test and earned its place among the stars. As the Guardian's song echoed through the water and into the ship, Jiwan felt his consciousness slowly returning to his own body. The vast awareness he had shared with the planetary mind gradually narrowed back to human perspective. But the memories of that incredible connection remained crystal clear. He had touched the thoughts of an entire world and helped it grow into something new. Dr. Soyon rushed to check his vital signs as soon as the neural link stabilized. "Captain, how do you feel? Your brain activity was beyond anything we could measure. We were worried we might lose you completely." Jiwan looked down at Nabi, who was resting peacefully in the habitat but watching him with those remarkable eyes. The little creature looked tired but satisfied, like someone who had just completed the most important work of their life. "I feel different," Jiwan said slowly. "Not damaged, but changed. I can still sense the planetary consciousness at the edge of my thoughts. I think the connection has left permanent traces in both our minds." Through the observation windows, they could see that the ocean world had transformed. The floating plants no longer pulsed with emergency warnings but glowed with complex patterns that seemed to welcome their presence. The water itself looked clearer and more vibrant, as if the entire ecosystem had relaxed and returned to its natural rhythms. The lead Guardian raised its massive head above the water until it was level with the ship's bridge. Its scales caught the light from the twin moons and scattered it in patterns that looked like living art. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics of deep satisfaction and genuine warmth. "The trial is complete," the Guardian announced. "Humanity has demonstrated wisdom far beyond their apparent age as a species. You have shown that you can work in harmony with other forms of life, that you can learn and adapt without losing your essential nature." More Guardians surfaced around the ship, each one adding its voice to the growing chorus of approval. Through his residual connection to Nabi, Jiwan could understand that this was a moment of great significance. For the first time in thousands of years, a new species was being formally welcomed into the galactic community. "You are invited to join the Great Assembly," the lead Guardian continued. "This is a gathering of all intelligent species in this region of the galaxy. There you will meet others who have passed similar trials, who have proven themselves worthy of trust and partnership." The implications of this invitation were staggering. Humanity had dreamed of finding other intelligent life among the stars, but they had never imagined being welcomed into an established community of civilizations. The lonely journey through space suddenly seemed much less lonely. "There are protocols to learn," another Guardian explained, its voice like the singing of deep ocean currents. "Ways of communication that span multiple species, methods of cooperation that have been developed over millions of years. But you have already shown that you can adapt and learn." Nabi suddenly became very active in its habitat, moving in complex patterns that Jiwan recognized as a form of celebration. Through their fading but still present mental link, he could sense the little creature's joy and relief. Its mission had been successful beyond all expectations. "Nabi wants to go with us," Jiwan realized. "Not just as a passenger but as an ambassador. The connection we have formed makes us natural translators between our species." The Guardians considered this proposal with the slow deliberation that characterized all their decisions. "The surface dweller has indeed proven to be an excellent bridge between different forms of consciousness," the lead Guardian agreed. "Such partnerships are rare and valuable. If both beings consent, this alliance could benefit the entire galactic community." Dr. Soyon ran additional scans on both Jiwan and Nabi, looking for any signs that their neural connection might be harmful. The brain patterns have stabilized at the new levels, she reported. Both subjects appear healthy, and the mental link seems to be strengthening rather than fading. This might be a permanent enhancement rather than temporary damage. The crew gathered on the bridge to witness what would later be recorded as one of the most important moments in human history. Captain Jiwon, still connected to an alien consciousness, formally accepted humanity's invitation to join the galactic community on behalf of his entire species. "We accept with gratitude and humility," Jiwon said, his words carrying harmonics that came from Nabi's influence. "Humanity pledges to learn from our elders in the galaxy, to contribute what wisdom we can, and to help protect the delicate balances that sustain life on all worlds." The Guardians began to sink slowly back into the depths, their task complete. But before the lead Guardian disappeared beneath the waves, it shared one final piece of information that would change everything. "The galaxy is vast and full of wonders," it said, "but it also faces challenges that require cooperation between all intelligent species. Dark forces move in the space between stars, beings that consume rather than create, that seek to destroy the networks of life that sustain civilized worlds." Through Nabi's translation, G1 understood that humanity's acceptance into the galactic community came with responsibilities as well as privileges. They would not just be learning from other species, but joining in the ancient struggle to protect life and consciousness throughout the galaxy. "There will be dangers ahead," the Guardian warned, "but you have shown that humans can be trusted to stand with others when the choice must be made between creation and destruction. This gives us hope for the future." As the Guardians disappeared into the deep waters, the Harmony's Edge began its journey back toward Earth. But this was no longer a simple exploration mission. They were returning as ambassadors from a community of worlds, carrying knowledge and responsibilities that would transform human civilization. Nabi settled comfortably into its permanent home, aboard the ship, no longer a rescued creature but a full partner in humanity's greatest adventure. The little being that Jiwon had pulled from the water had become the key to opening doors that humanity had never even known existed. Looking out at the stars through the observation deck windows, Jiwon smiled as he felt Nabi's contentment flowing through their permanent mental link. Sometimes the most important moments in history began with the simplest acts of kindness. He had seen a creature in trouble and had chosen to help, not knowing that this single decision would change the fate of his entire species. The stars were calling, and for the first time in human history, they were calling with voices of welcome and friendship. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was finally ready to explore them as part of something much greater than themselves. In the depths below, the Guardians sang their ancient songs of protection and hope, knowing that the community of worlds had grown stronger by one more species committed to the preservation of life and consciousness throughout the universe.